Hello my friends, Fujifilm X-H2 is easily one of my favorite cameras released in 2022. Fujifilm has introduced a lot of new technologies with both X-H2 cameras in a package that is much better suited to compete with mainstream hybrid cameras. The feedback was mostly positive, but the X-H2 hasn't really caught as much attention as I expected. I've been using my X-H2 for 1 year, and in this video I would like to share my long-term experiences with X-Mount's high-resolution flagship. Regarding the physical appearance of the X-H2, I still think that it is one of the best body styles on the market. Fujifilm was able to retain just enough vintage styling to retain the general design language. At the same time, they were able to come up with efficient design necessary to accommodate technology and ergonomy of a pragmatic workhorse device. The build quality is great. Mine still looks as good as new, and I would say that it is one of the most premium feeling cameras on the market. It is not the smallest or the lightest APS-C camera at 660 grams, but the size to performance ratio is still really good, as I will explain throughout this video. Probably the most important piece of technology premiered in the X-H2 is the new X-Trans 5 HR backside illuminated 40 megapixel sensor. After all of the testing that I have done over the last year, I can conclude that Fujifilm got this part right. Some people, including myself, were skeptical about 40 megapixel resolution on APS-C. Fortunately, the lens design has come a long way in the past couple of years, and I am confident to say that there is sufficient selection of lenses that can take advantage of this kind of resolution. Fujifilm X-H2 can capture a great amount of detail when paired with one of those lenses. It can actually capture a very solid amount of detail even with below average lenses. One more thing that I haven't talked about before is the raw detailed feature in the Lightroom. Handling of X-Trans files in the Lightroom has been a controversial topic for a while. My conclusion with the X-Trans 5 is that in the real-world use, you don't have to be worried about it at all. If you, for whatever reason, want to zoom in to more than 200% and see as much detail as possible, I recommend using raw detailed feature in the enhancement menu. That will fix blended fine textures that you can see if you zoom beyond 200%. It doesn't seem that it is doing anything other than fixing those textures, so I wouldn't say that it is cheating or anything like that. The ISO performance is roughly the same as with the X-Trans 4, maybe a tiny bit better, despite that the base ISO has been lowered to 125. That is actually a big success, as proven by the new G9 II, which seems to have sacrificed quite a lot of high ISO performance in order to achieve lower base ISO. The dynamic range is improved over the X-Trans 4 and not that far from full-frame cameras. Especially at the base ISO, you won't notice much of a difference in comparison to full-frame in real-world situations. The difference will get bigger at higher ISO values, but for APS-C it is probably the best performance that I have seen so far. I've talked about the colors in my original review. I think that they are generally very good, with an interesting, tasteful approach to cold tone preference. All 19 film simulations that have been released so far are available as well. Overall, this sensor provides the best amount of detail that you can get with APS-C and outstanding dynamic range without sacrificing high ISO performance, so I'm more than happy with this result. Despite that the X-H2 uses a high-resolution sensor, it is still a fairly fast camera. It can shoot 15 frames per second with mechanical shutter and autofocus continuous, which is quite respectable. The buffer capacity is also great, especially when you pair it with CF-Express Type B card. The autofocus is a bit of tricky topic. In stills it works very well. Focus acquisition is very fast, 100% accurate with no hunting. That applies even in low light and low contrast situations. The tracking has been improved in firmware 2.0. I actually was able to get a perfect hit rate in my usual walking towards the camera test, but still not in every run. Despite that, I would still trust this system for fast action. You should get enough sharp images to choose from even in more difficult situations. Subject detection is also very solid, so I don't really have any major complaints when it comes to stills autofocus. That is not necessarily the case with video autofocus. As I've said in my original review, it works well in most reasonable real-world situations, and that hasn't changed. It has actually gotten a lot better with new firmware. In more difficult situations, there still may be a slight pause during the focus transitions when focusing from close distance to infinity. What has changed is the context. Panasonic S5 II is another camera with pretty much perfect video autofocus that works flawlessly in any situation. That moves Fujifilm towards the bottom when it comes to video autofocus performance. The latest firmware update has closed maybe half of the gap, but there still is a lot of work that needs to be done. And what absolutely needs to be fixed are video focus area settings and touch tracking, which is not available at all. There is no excuse for that anymore, and my disappointment with Fujifilm's refusal to fix this issue is growing worse with every new Fuji camera that repeats this mistake. Fortunately, video specifications may be a reason to forgive Fujifilm for that. X-H2 can shoot 8K, and despite that some people say that 8K will never become a standard, I think that I've heard that one before, I appreciate it a lot. In terms of the image quality and detail, it is definitely a real deal. The 8K video is extremely detailed and looks great in every way. The only negative is the rolling shutter, which will limit the usability of 8K. The same applies to fully downsampled 8K to 4K HQ video. The image quality is fantastic in every way, but rolling shutter is pretty significant. Fortunately, there is non-HQ 4K, which is roughly as detailed as Fujifilm X-T4 video, with a rolling shutter that is completely fine for all-round use. 4K 60p video comes with a 1.14x crop and some pixel binning, which is in my opinion acceptable with a high-resolution camera. As I've explained in my original review, there is absolutely no compromise when it comes to frame rates, aspect ratios, and bit rates. The highest video quality that it can shoot internally is 8K 30p in ProRes 422 HQ 10-bit 422 at staggering 3520 megabits per second. With this kind of specifications, it goes deep into the serious filmmaking territory. F-Log 2 is one of the best log profiles on the market, especially if you stay around the base ISO in 8K or 4K HQ mode. Overall, Fujifilm X-H2 is in my opinion a great video camera not only for content creators but also for pretty serious filmmaking. The in-body image stabilization in the X-H2 is rated at 7 stops. The strengths of this IB system are stills and static shots. In stills mode, I was able to get almost 1 second exposures at 24mm full frame equivalent without a stabilized lens. Static shots in video are very stable even beyond 100mm full frame equivalent, which is one of the best results of all cameras that I've ever tested. Walking is not as good as with Panasonic S5 II or Sony a7R5. That isn't really something that was expected from a DSLM cameras until recently. Fujifilm X-H2 is a purely pragmatic Fujifilm camera that is better suited to compete with A7, R6 or S5 lines. I think that creating a fully pragmatic camera has helped the X-T5 as much as it did the X-H2. The existence of the X-H2 has allowed the X-T5 to focus more on being an experience-oriented stills camera. XT controls and shape were never really meant for hybrid workhorse camera, and some of the elements of the X-T4, such as the camcorder-style screen, fell out of the place. On the other hand, the X-H2 is very well suited to be a hybrid camera. It uses conventional controls with PSAM dial and command dials. That is definitely a correct choice for a camera that is meant to get the job done in the first place. The grip is in my opinion very well shaped, deep enough, and there is sufficient gap between the grip and the lens. I think that most people will be happy with this grip, including integrated strap mounts. The X-H2 has 2 command dials, a joystick, D-pad, and sufficient amount of logically positioned buttons. The buttons have a very solid feel to them. Probably the only thing that I miss is a dedicated dry mode dial. There is a well-placed drive button though. Also worth mentioning is that you can set up 7 custom presets that can be selected on the PSAM dial. Any of them can store stills or video setting. Top plate LCD is also available. Opinions on that one are split. Some people say that it is absolutely necessary, other people say that it is a waste of space. What I like about this one is that it is always on and it shows the remaining battery life even when the camera is off. I actually look at it from time to time, but I would probably trade it for a dedicated dry mode dial. Nothing has changed when it comes to the user interface, but now in late 2023 I feel like it could use some modernization or at least touch functionality even without redesign. Sony's menu items are even smaller and it still works with a touchscreen, so why not? The structure of the menu is actually still one of the best in my opinion, and the full screen Q menu is probably the best, again in my opinion. Both the display and electronic viewfinder are among the best in the class. The display uses a 3-inch 1.62 million dot panel. It is a very good panel. It is sharp, color accurate and bright enough for outdoors use. The electronic viewfinder is even more impressive. It uses 5.76 million dot panel with 0.80 times magnification. This is the best panel in the class. Very detailed and bright. I have made my peace with a rotating screen on the X-H2, but it still wouldn't be my choice. It just doesn't feel right on Fujifilm. One of those hybrid mechanisms or even 3-way tilting screen would be more fitting in my opinion. The battery life depends a lot on how you use the camera. When I am taking stills, it will easily last a day of visual testing, which is quite similar to travel photography scenarios. It is also possible to get up to 90 minutes of downsampled 4K or 8K, which is pretty solid, but there are some cameras that will give you more 4K recording time. The X-H2 uses the NPW325 battery with 220 mAh capacity, of course. I feature the X-H2 in 2 comparisons with full-frame hybrid cameras, the A7 IV and S5 II. When compared to either of them, it does what the APS-C high-end camera is supposed to do. It provides generally better feature set in exchange for having a smaller sensor. It is much more nuanced than that, of course, but I can say that it provides enough compensation for the smaller sensor to be competitive with either of them. Both comparisons will be linked in the description. Regarding the lens selection, the X-mount selection is very good in some areas, but some of the lenses are due for an update. I think that it is time for a new premium standard zoom. 16-55 f2.8 is still a good lens, but the bokeh isn't particularly nice, it is quite large, and it is not parfocal. Optical qualities are good, but not excellent by 2023 standards. I'm sure that Fujifilm can make a much better bright standard zoom, and now I think that it is time to do it. On the other hand, 18mm, 23mm and 33mm RLMWR primes are among the best crop lenses that I've ever tested. 56mm non-LM is optically great, but the choice to use that super loud focusing mode is very difficult to understand. A big part of the X-mount selection are now the Viltrox lenses. 27mm and 75mm f1.2 Pro at least match RLMWR primes from Fujifilm. 13mm f1.4 is also great. To sum up, Fujifilm X-H2 is a high-resolution APS-C camera done right. There are some annoyances, but overall the pros outweigh the cons significantly. First of all, the sensor and the output are the best among APS-C cameras. The dynamic range is great and the ISO performance is not compromised, as I've explained. I would say that it also strikes a good balance between being a high-resolution camera and all-round camera. Continuous shooting speed is very solid, especially when combined with CF Express card. The video specifications are great as well, including 8K capabilities and fully downsampled 8K to 4K. Autofocus in the stills mode is very good and it is getting better with updates. The video autofocus is also improving, but at the moment it can't fully match the competition. I also have to criticize the lack of area modes and touch tracking in video. The physical aspects are very good though. It is very well made and the handling is solid. The choice of the rotating screen is questionable. One more thing that I have to say is that the X-H2 still retains a lot of Fuji factor despite being a pragmatic camera. I won't say that it is hugely different from the competition from Sony or Panasonic in terms of the user experience, but it looks good in my opinion, the control elements are a bit different, and you also get those film simulations that are a lot of fun to use. I think that this is a great option for Fujifilm users who were using XT cameras semi-professionally or even professionally. I think that it is a very good camera overall, not perfect, but the strengths definitely outweigh the weaknesses. That means that I can recommend it. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section. And see you next time.